Hello, dear students of IS and ICT. I welcome you to yet another video, this time on research design and quantitative research approach. So some of the things I will not go back to defining. In the first video, I defined what research design is. So we are simply going to go ahead and delve right into the research design of quantitative research methods. So quantitative research methods. This basically involves laboratory and non-laboratory procedures. It involves measurements, as we have talked about quite extensively. So what is it? First of all, it starts with an assumption. Yeah, a statement which is an assumption. For example, look at this statement: hot drinks promote warm feelings. And one can decide to say, I'm going to carry out a research and find out if this statement is true. So it starts with a statement, something like this. Let's look at others, like 3 cups of coffee a day may shrink women's breasts. Cold, frosty, and healthy researchers brewing up a cancer-fighting beer. Those are typical hypothesis statements. Typical hypothesis statements. So quantitative methods are looking at measurements. So what are we measuring? We're measuring, the measurements are in populations, sampling, random assignments, generalizability. When we are looking at populations, one is looking at a certain target population. For example, if we think about one of the topics we've seen there, hot drinks promote warm feelings. And somebody will say, okay, what part of the population actually takes hot drinks? What part of the population? Maybe adults. Someone may say, I'm looking at adults or students. Maybe for beers, for beers, the beer hypothesis statement would probably best go to students, undergraduate students. That question may go there. And then one person decides to go and samples that population and carries out a study. One may actually do a random assignment, just does a random assignment and finds out this group of people, if they take hot drinks, how do they feel? If these ones take cold drinks, how do they feel? And then comes out, then the results are generalized, saying, yeah, it is true, hot drinks do promote warm feelings, or no, it is not true. Now, quantitative research methods can be time bound within a specific time or longitudinal in nature. We've seen these in detail. We've talked about this in detail, so we shall not repeat them in this recording. So experimental methods, we have seen what types of quantitative research methods are. We have seen the laboratory experiments, both laboratory and non-laboratory. We've seen survey, we've talked about surveys. We also have social network analysis. I think many people have heard of stories how Facebook, WhatsApp is used to collect information about user behavior or user preferences. Um, I think there was even a situation where some governments or some political groups were accused of using social network analysis to determine on how certain people will respond to certain topics. I think the former US president was, I think that was one of the things that was brought up. Why did Facebook, looks like Facebook helped him and use this, but it's also one of the quantitative research methods. So, for example, Google can provide to certain global multimedia, multinational firms a profile of Ugandans, those who can afford to go to McDonald's, those who are more prone to accessing pornographic sites, those who are into health. The profile of Uganda, they can actually give that information based on our use of the Google platforms and Google, all the different Google tools. So just based on that, those are part of the social network analysis methods. So what are we going to talk about? We want to start with, we're going to talk about sampling. That's one of the design methods. Random assignment. This one will be at a minimum level, and then generalizability and validation. Yeah, those are two areas that we shall talk about. So let's start our discussion on sampling. We have seen many reasons of why would we choose quantitative research over mixed methods or qualitative research. We know that three general perspectives of what approach are we trying to do. Is our question exploratory? Is our question descriptive? Or is it explanatory? Quantitative research falls between descriptive and explanatory. Exploratory and sometimes descriptive can also be used for quantitative. So descriptive is the in-between part. So if our research is largely explanatory, then we know it's quantitative research we want. So when we want to begin our sampling, we first specify the population that is of concern, the population that we need to study. Now, from there, we go ahead and select the respondents concerned with that population. We may decide to do random sampling. So random sampling, this is where you pick at random. You know, this is my target population. Maybe if it is teachers, and I'm just going to do random sampling so that I make sure I get all types of teachers, all types of lecturers, and different types to answer a specific survey question or to go through a certain laboratory experiment. Be systematic selection, stratified, convenience, and snowballing. I think we saw some of these in the previous research, so I will not go through this in detail. Now, in sampling, there can be biases. Yeah. What is one of the biases or one of the challenges, the things that are challenging with sampling? One is non-response bias. Now, this is one of the challenges when it comes to survey research. You pick your selected sample size, you send out your questionnaire, especially if you're sending it by email. If you have an electronic one using SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, and there's no response, or there's very limited response. Why is this a problem? The thing that quantitative research depends on a lot is number of respondents. The more the number of respondents, the bigger your opportunity to generalize and validate your findings. The lower your number of respondents, the limited you're limited in your opportunity to generalize your findings. So what can one do? Be persistent. I remember there was one lady I was seated with doing my PhD. I used to share an office with her. And I remember at a certain point she got really frustrated when she sent out questionnaires and there was an extremely low response rate, extremely low. She said, I have sent out response emails. At some point I told her, start calling them. Just start calling people so that you can get a certain number. So be persistent. Offer incentives and rewards for people who will respond. Although sometimes that can be seen as bribery. But just offer an incentive. For example, if it is with the people in an organization, you can offer the incentive that, okay, please come in a certain space, I buy you a soda as you fill out your questionnaire, something like that. Make it look important. Show the significance of answering this. What will be the importance of the findings? Why will it be of significance? And how will it help me, the respondent, that I should spare my time to fill out this questionnaire? So this quantitative research, especially using surveys, it can take a really short time to collect data, but it can also be a time when you actually fail to get any data, when you have unresponsive respondents. The second is volunteer bias. When people volunteer to answer, when they sometimes there are certain people who are used to volunteering to do certain tasks. They're just used to it. Oh, do this. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm the person to do that particular thing. But this person is not qualified to answer your questions. They may not have the right information, but just because I'm the right. I'm always here. Let me answer. But they're really not qualified. So one of the ways we try to, I will talk about one of the ways we try to validate our data is being very specific with our target audience, that we know these are the people who are qualified to answer the questionnaire, not just anyone who simply volunteers. So those are the things you need to look at for sampling biases: non-response, and those who are quick to say, oh, let me be the one to respond, and yet they actually are unqualified to give an appropriate response. Now, what we are targeting for is generalizability. Generalizability. Sometimes the word is too big. That is the thing that we're targeting for. How do you know that what you found in your research is actually the general trend? Yeah. If you've given a questionnaire to just university students, regardless of whether they're from UMU, whatever, but you've sampled there, this is a number of university students, I'm sampling this amount and I'm going to give. How do I know? That's the first question. That's what generalizability means. Does A really cause B? That's what one find. Is there an actual dependency situation? Is it an association or a causal effect? Because that's what explanation wants, an explanatory research wants to find out. Is there an actual causal effect? If A happens, is B really likely to happen as you claim? And under what conditions? So one of the things we want to find out is it an association or is it a causality? I'll give you an example. I remember there was some research that was pointing out, in some data that was pointing out that people with HIV were also found to have certain types of cancer. So the question was there a causality or was there an association? That many times people who have this also have this. Like for example, people with hypertension also sometimes have diabetes. But is there a cause? Does one cause the other? So those are questions that one may ask. So here are examples that is there a relationship between a causal relationship between education and income, or it's just an association? Is there an association or causal effect between hard work and income? So this is one of the things that you want to determine. So how do we create a research design that allows us to validate our research in quantitative research? Yeah, that we draw accurate conclusions after we've carried out our quantitative research. One, we carry out internal validation, and internal validation is strictly looking at correctness of conclusions, that you have correctness of conclusions. When the researchers' findings are accurate, they actually reflect a relationship, the accurate relationship between two variables. Yeah, they have for example, you might find me let me just give you an actual example. I was at my ancestral home, somewhere in West, in another, not here in Fort Portal, but somewhere else. And we were in a house, and my two siblings from same father, same mother, were seated in one part of the house, and this gentleman walks in who knew my cousin. And the minute he saw me, he said, "You must be Sister John Paul's sister, because you look alike." Of course, yes, that was true. We looked alike, but she's my cousin. She's not my sister. I had my two siblings there. So you could say there was a physical resemblance, but the conclusion he came to was not precisely accurate. It may be accurate in the traditional African way, she is my sister, but in the proper relationship way, she is my cousin. So it wasn't an accurate conclusion. But what we want to do is to come to an accurate conclusion. So what we want to see, what are those internal validate, what are those structures we can put there to make sure that we come to accurate conclusion. Then the second is an external validation, that we want to generalize our findings to the entire population. Yeah, that any population that is within this study, whether they were part of this study or not, the findings can be generalized to those other parts of the population. So one, attaining both, how do we achieve internal and external validation? We have three controls that we consider. One is systematic variance, the other is confounding variance, and the third is error variance. What are these three things that we want to look at? We're going to look at these three in detail. The principle is refers to as maximin con. Maximin con. So that stands for maximize, minimize, and control. Maximize, minimize, and control. Let's look at this in detail. So maximizing systematic variance. What is this? What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean for us? Here, we want to actually determine if let's say it's an experiment, we want to determine that an independent variable actually has an impact on a dependent variable. That is what we want to determine, that an independent variable actually has impact on a dependent variable. So take the example of term theory, which says usefulness will lead to adoption. That means non-usefulness will lead to non-adoption. So we want to determine that, or rather, usability leads to adoption. And non-usability means if something is found to be not usable, then it will lead to non-adoption. The question is, we want to determine if these variables are actually dependent. So one can say in an experimental laboratory experiment, one can be able to control that, manipulate and control that, and actually determine if one has a causal effect on the other, not just an association, but as an actual causal effect. Yeah. So here you create a wide range of variables. So you create a wide range of variables. If it's about adoption, you look at usability, you look at, sometimes it can be management support, bringing in adoption. It can also be, other people talk about the environment, maybe if the environment in which you introduce the system, you introduce all those aspects. Other people talk about age, the age of the user. Somebody who is an older person may not easily pick up using a certain system. Other times it could be your beliefs, your personal beliefs, and so on and so forth. I remember I gave an example that for me, my father picked up WhatsApp before me. I actually started using WhatsApp after my father died. So you can imagine, and I'm an ICT professional. So someone can say, let me introduce a number of variables which will look at adoption, so that we actually ascertain if there's an actual impact. Yeah, an actual impact. And for non-experimental studies, one can decide to select subjects that are sufficiently different with respect to the study's main variant. Okay, you select several subjects. Maybe if you're looking at research on lecturers, you look at different age groups, you look at different academic professions. You may find ICT science lecturers may be more prone, or ICT lecturers may be more levitated towards using ICT, younger ones. And so you select a wide range to make sure that you really want to determine if if this independent variable does actually have a causal effect on the dependent variable. So that one is maximizing. The previous was maximizing systematic variance. Then there is minimizing error variance. Yeah, minimizing error variance. Now, this one largely depends on your tools, your data collection tools, how well designed they are. Now, let us pick the example of the survey research method, which depends on questionnaires, whether it is a hard copy questionnaire or it is one that is developed using SurveyMonkey or Google, the Google Forms, whatever it is, whatever should I say platform you've used to design administer your questionnaire. Your questionnaire itself must be very well designed. A poorly designed instrument will give you wrong results. Yeah, will give you wrong results. That is one of the most important things. Why? The responses your subjects will give you will automatically be wrong. If your wording is not correct, if they misinterpret the words that you're trying to say. I remember for me, I used a survey, like I gave the example for my research, I used a survey. And I remember one of the first things I did was to test it. That's one of the ways we minimize the error variance. You pre-test your questionnaire before you actually give it to your population. So you can give it to an expert researcher, somebody who is really good at quantitative research. There are people who are really good at quantitative, there are those who are really good at qualitative. So one of the things you can give it to an expert in that area, maybe even in a particular research area, give it to them and ask them to go through it. Then you also get a sample population and give it to them, and then ask them, see if you've gotten the right response. Even ask them if the questions they understood them after. Just have a mini interview with them. If they understood, then you can make changes. So for me, I remember after I did my research, I did my test, I made sure I got for example, when I was doing VHTs, the village health teams, I got VHTs who speak English because I'm not very good with Luganda. So I got it and I asked these people to answer. And then after I asked them to give me a response. So one of the things they say that some terms are very technical, people will not understand them. So I went back and refined it. And then when I was going to administer it, my research assistant told me that, you know what, let's not change this questionnaire let's not translate it to Luganda because we may lose some meaning. Let us go, and as a group I will translate to Luganda and ask and then even explain, then ask them to respond. So that was one way we avoided errors. We minimized on the error variance. So how to minimize? I think I've talked about this. Giving your instrument to others to look at. That the other way, which looks at contextual factors, if there are things that within the context that may create noise, that may, for example, something that, like one of my respondents said, this term may be misappropriated. You may want to like, for example, my research assistant said, let me translate to Luganda directly verbally and explain question by question. So that created an ideal condition, an ideal context, so that you gave the respondents a less opportunity to misinterpret your questionnaire. The third and final is the controlling variance. Now, this particular variance is looking at finding, as you're carrying out either your survey or laboratory experiments, you may find that there may be some things that may interfere, or they call them confounding variables, or something that may affect the relationship between your independent and dependent variable. So what do I mean by this? look at the example of the COVID-19 pandemic, or the treatments that came up of COVID-19. Now, I think until recent, at the beginning of this year, I think some scientists actually came up with medicines that can cure COVID-19. What we had before were medications that can control the side effects as the body fights the virus. Now, when the researchers who are trying to find out what can cure, they may have a laboratory experiment where they actually try to find out, does this medication actually kill the COVID-19 virus? And they answer the question yes or no. They bring several medications and do that. Now, there's bringing that experiment out of the lab and bringing it into a live environment. And you give this medication to a person. But at the same time, this person is also using the herbal remedies that were recommended previously, like steaming, taking vitamin C's, eating a lot of fruits, pineapples. I remember one person said pineapple was seen to fight viruses, doing all of that. Now, in that case, the confounding variable would be those things that help you fight, the antibodies within your bodies, those things that increase your body, your immune system to be able to fight this thing. So in others, those are the confounding variables. So one of the ways we control confounding variables is, for example, laboratory experiments. That is one way that we try to control. Yeah, we try to control those confounding variables. And so that's one, experimental labs. And then for surveys, what we do is only including subjects with appropriate characteristics. So this is one of the ways we actually even control, we actually try to find out, does this thing actually cause this? Try and not get errors with our respondents. We avoid the volunteering kind of thing, the volunteer biases, those people who like to just volunteer to answer your questionnaires. Only pick subjects that are with appropriate characteristics. So if, for example, if we are giving male students, of male university students, that's exactly who we get. You may get a situation where someone says, oh, Mimi, and the person is actually just visiting at the university but not part of the population. So that is one of the ways we control those confounding variables. So those are just some of the steps we take in our research design. I know it's quite mouthy and hard, but we can continue this discussion on Moodle. Thank you for listening.